Hey folks, this is Dr. Emily Scherning with AR. We're back with our second destination cities video, this time focusing on the second of our big three destination regions, the Northern Midwest. We're going to start at the southern edge of the region and move to the north, hitting cities in each of the four states we're exploring today. When I talk about the Northern Midwest as a destination region, we're looking at northern Iowa, northern Illinois, central to southern Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Are there other good places in the Midwest? Yes, but I think this limited region we're exploring today is the most desirable. Because, like our highlighted region in the Northeast, this focused destination region is where we're looking at the lowest level of change, lowest rate of change, as well as the highest capacity for taking folks in terms of water and infrastructure. Our first stop is going to be Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So hear me out. Cedar Rapids, you may have seen it in the news because it's frequently flooded or afflicted by other natural disasters. I got news for you. Every halfway decent sized city in Iowa, if not the Midwest in general, is going to have that happen. The Midwest is a region that is already characterized by frequent natural disasters. They're preloaded. Even before we move into more intense storms as we get in towards mid-century, we already have flooding, we already have wind, we already have severe winter weather. Our cultures are already resilient to it. And every city that I have talked with anyone has a plan for continuing to harden against disaster. In a region where you can expect trouble, Cedar Rapids is the undisputed bounce back king. They're amazingly resilient. They clean up, they come back stronger every time. And that's what I look for when I consider who's going to make it. You got to look for the fighter, right? This is a decent sized city. Second largest in Iowa, about 140,000 people. And I want to show you on the map, just in case you're not super familiar with the region. So ground yourself. There's Chicago. If you're not from the Midwest, you probably know that Chicago is like our biggest city, right? If you head west, here's the ICR. Hour into Iowa, Cedar Rapids is the northern, Iowa City is the southern end of that. But Cedar Rapids really has the better climate outlook. I want to show you the summer and the winter projections. So this is our region here. The website is being really slow today, so I'm just putting it up big. You can see that northern Iowa is the edge of sort of the conventional, classic, cool Midwestern summer, where Cedar Rapids is about here and Iowa City is about here. If we look towards 2050 under RCP 4.5, we see a higher level of change, this border where we're going to be moving between 3 and 4 months over 86, kind of hits in the middle of the ICR. If we look at plant hardiness zones, right now the ICR is safely in zone 5. We can see that Iowa City is going to probably fall into zone 6, where Cedar Rapids is likelier to stay in zone 5. So a dramatic summer change. Let's get serious. Look at this again. Dramatic summer change coming to much of the northern Midwest, even in this targeted region. But with a less dramatic summer change than the southern part of the ICR and more stability in the winter that's going to help protect mature plants, Cedar Rapids, it's just undisputable. And right now, in Iowa City, the urban heat island effect is already quite substantial, more substantial than in Cedar Rapids. It's quite common when I go to either of those cities that it will be 8 degrees warmer in Iowa City than it is at my place out in the country. In Cedar Rapids, only maybe 3, not as big a magnification. So I'm giving Cedar Rapids the pick for Iowa, not only because of this relative climate stability and the highly cultivated resilience culture, but also because of Cedar Rapids' economic resilience. There are a lot of jobs here in the context of a healthy, diverse local economy. There are many factory jobs, like good paying ones, like 50, 60 a year, steady industrial processing work for local agricultural products, very insulated industries. Good medical care, good higher ed opportunities too. The housing prices are excellent. Also, you already know what parts of the city are going to flood. So you just do a little homework and you don't buy those houses. The housing is very affordable and very nice. The city and the larger area are predominantly white, Christian, and conservative. If you have negative assumptions about that large group of people, it's worth questioning your assumptions. This is a really good culture here. It's a city with a rich history of welcoming. There are many healthy minority communities in Cedar Rapids, good specialty grocery stores, every kind of worship, congregational opportunity. The Mosque of America is here. It's the first building designed and constructed as a house of worship for Muslims in America, completed in 1934. Iowa legalized marriage equality in 2009, 6 years before federal recognition. Per capita, Iowa sent more soldiers to the Civil War than any other state in the union. There is a deep love of freedom and hatred for oppression in Iowa. There's a lot of information to consider if you're thinking about Cedar Rapids. It is an area with positives and negatives. Those natural disasters are intense. But speaking of the region, speaking of the culture, I want to pull up the hate map for just a second. I want to show you that the region as a whole, the Midwest, has a lower level of hate groups per capita than either the Northeast as a region, like the darker color, the more affiliation, or the Pacific Northwest. And that of this lower hate region, Iowa has the lowest level of hate group affiliation of any of the states in the Midwest. Which of the destination regions, it is going to be your best if that's an area of concern for you. Let's move east a little bit. I want to check out a city that I'd like to highlight in Illinois. It is a different city. It is not like a super gigantic city. It's for people who are looking for more like a town that they can come into from the country, or maybe they want to live right there. And that is Freeport, Illinois. Freeport, Illinois, you can see it's pretty small. It's in the fields, about 25,000 people. It's about an hour from Rockford, about 2 hours from Chicago. And if we zoom in, I was talking about flooding with Cedar Rapids, right? Shouldn't shock you. Freeport also is a place that could flood. If we zoom in, we can see that this has a little bit of a flooding advantage here in Freeport. It has flooded there, but their river is more on one side of town. It's not going like through the town. So there is a more of the housing stock that is less vulnerable to flooding in Freeport than in some places. If we look at the climate outlook, we can see that Freeport used to have a cool summer, and it is going to be hot. The summer is going to be about twice as many days, over 86. So one thing that is very positive here is that you were in zone 5. You're staying in zone 5. There's very little of Illinois that is going to maintain a classic Midwestern winter. That's going to be very hopeful in terms of your health of your mature plants. And with there only being in the 90-degree category for the summer heat, you're in an area where corn and soy are going to be able to continue to be grown without the need for new development, new genetic modifications. Talking about culturally what's going on in Freeport, it's pretzels. I'm serious. Freeport is like a very pretzel-centered town. It's adorable. The housing is so affordable and it's small. You're not going to have everything there, but you're like an hour from Rockford. You're 2 hours from Chicago. If you want stuff, you can go get them. You can come back to your super affordable housing, and you can come back to your small town that has done a lot of programming with the local Audubon Society and the local art museum, which they have in a town of 25,000 people, and they're doing a lot of projects together to bring in speakers to talk about dialogue around diversity, discrimination, and inclusion. If you remember the news story in 2020 about Mr. Cooper, the Birding Will Black story, their Audubon Society had him come out and speak. Wants to have conversations. This is a place that has a surprisingly great density of culture. They're really hitting above their weight class in terms of cultural amenities. It's a nice little space. It's safe there. It's cute. And I love places that have potential for agricultural stability. I like living in the fields. Corn's the best neighbor ever. But many people, it's fair. You could want some different scenery. Let's check it out for you. Let's move on up to Wisconsin. The first place that we're going to highlight in Wisconsin, I have already talked about it a little bit. I talked about it in the destination region video, and that is going to be Green Bay. If you're not familiar with it, Green Bay is sort of like right in the little notch here, that thumb that sticks out into Lake Michigan. If you're a plant nerd like me, this is a really fun base for exploring this extremely botanically interesting peninsula. This is a fun place to find most of North America's rarest and most beautiful orchids. But we're not here to talk about orchids. We're here to talk about climate. Let me talk to you a little bit about Green Bay's climate for you. You can see it used to be classic Midwestern cool. Very rare. We see good preservation of the classic summer cool. Maybe a couple weeks a year over 86 added to it, but that is not that high a level of stress compared to the rest of the region. Plant hardiness zones used to be zone 5 marginal to zone 6. This side around the lake here was you get right up to the lake. It's stabilizes the winter temperature a little bit. You're closer to zone 6 than zone 5. And we can see that margin is increasing, but it's a small change. It's a small increase in your plant hardiness zone. It's not a full zone shift you're talking about there. So good summer stability, good winter stability, and it's just a beautiful city. It has a lot of monumental brickwork there, a very classic European monumental brickwork. The cathedral there is a wonderful example of this in all of North America. It's a predominantly Catholic city. It's 70% Catholic. The city is part of the statewide flood assessment. There are some neighborhoods of the city that are vulnerable to flooding. They did experience pretty severe flooding in 2019. If you're considering moving to the Midwest, you're noticing a theme, right? Flooding is going to happen. You need to look at the flooding patterns before you choose a place to live in any Midwestern city. If you look at national precipitation trends, there is going to be a notable increase in spring rains in this region, and it already floods here in the spring. Building resilience against flooding, getting more people out of flood zones, that's a major current resilience focus of many communities in this region. When we talk about culture in Green Bay, this is a city that's taking the public health crisis approach to issues of discrimination because it is a health crisis there. People of color in the county there were dying more than 16 years earlier on average than white people. In 2020 made this public health declaration. There are many signs of continuing community work since then, and many public statements that making a declaration is the first step of a process. Talking about hate group density, you can see that, like I said, the Midwest has overall lower rates of hate group affiliation. Wisconsin is the darkest shaded of the states that we're exploring today. And we're going to actually talk about one more city in Wisconsin, though, because of its excellence as a climate destination. It's worth pointing out that they are on the map. In Wausau, Wisconsin, you see a group producing hate music. So let's get serious. I am not inclined to listen to the hate music, but to me, that seems different than a group that has a history of violent activity. I feel like we can acknowledge that there are some cultural problems all across America, right? And there are some areas in Wisconsin that do have cultural problems, but Wausau deserves someone to say some good things about them. They deserve some good press as a climate destination. They want to get on the map as a climate destination. They want to get on your radar. And as a climate destination, they are just so nice. They're so fabulous. I want to show you that. Let me get over to the heat zone. Let me give you a little bit of an overview here. So when you think about Wisconsin, you should think about dairy. This is a place where the dairy industry is huge, where there's a lot of heritage breeds of cattle that produce particularly good milk to feed this artisanal dairy industry. When we're talking about Wausau, we're talking about this part of the state right here in the central. So this is the map today. Look, we have pretty good, cool summer preservation extending further south than we're going to see anywhere else in the destination region. So more normative day length, not the same sort of extreme short days in the winter, extremely long days in the summer, more normative day length. Pretty good summer conservation and pretty good winter conservation. Look, if you get much farther north, you're up in the zone 3 plant hardiness zone, so cold. Here you're in zone 4, and look, you're staying marginal zone 4, zone 5. So you've got like a half zone shift, not a full zone shift. Excellent in terms of agricultural stability in a region where a culturally significant industry has a good outlook. If you are interested in homesteading, if you're a person who's interested in getting some land and having some small animal operation, if you want to have 2 or 3 cows, their outlook for animal husbandry is more challenging in many parts of the US and in many parts of the Midwest because of those long, hot summers. That's going to reduce your quality of life for most of your traditional farm animals for North America. There are, of course, hot weather breeds that would be more suited to our future climate. Tradition. If you're talking about having the same type of chickens that your grandma used to have, this is a precious area to go to. This area is also likely to be south of serious wildfire danger. In the vanishing zone 3 region, we do anticipate some stress to forests, particularly at the very northern edge of Wisconsin and in that northern third of Minnesota. Wausau manages to skirt that danger. It's in such a sweet spot where it keeps the cool summer, has winter stability, not a lot of wildfire, no worse flooding than anywhere else. It's just classic. Classic summers, classic winters, classic Midwest. There is that one threat that I mentioned when you look about housing, right? I said it does have flooding. It is a river city. It is going to have flooding there. And you should use smart choices if you're considering property there. You should never buy or rent any property that has ever flooded because it will flood again. And any new development, you should assume that it's going to flood until you have evidence proving otherwise. The moderation of that climate outlook, the economic stability projected for the region, the rarity of this environment, I'm incredibly optimistic about Wausau's future. The community is having some major cultural study struggles right now. It sounds like everyone is really hot. Like really mad at each other. In good part because the New York Times came in and wrote a story on the town and made everyone super mad. Like no one feels fairly represented by the New York Times story. I kept reading about it. A lot of people in Wausau, they want to talk about welcoming racism and discrimination. There are other people in the community who think talking about these things will cause more conflict. But my takeaway after really trying to explore that conflict, we can note that they have conflict without that putting a damper on their excellence as a potential destination, because there's no evidence that the town is like some violent hate hotspot. There's not a lot of violence there. They're an active Afghan refugee settlement center. Like there's no sign that these guys are like all jerks here. And the quality of life is known to be fantastic on many metrics. If I were you, I'd note there is some conflict in the region and I would keep Wausau on the list. Please note, if you're a person who's more interested in land than urban living, if you're a person who wants to keep some animals, I cannot stress enough, the outlying area is incredible. It's a fantastic outlook. It's beautiful country. I picked two cities in Wisconsin because I wanted to highlight a couple of destinations that share that classic Midwestern climate, the relatively cool summer climate. That cool summer climate, it's projected to remain stable much further into Wisconsin than in Minnesota. I'm pulling up the 2050 map again so that we can take a look at that together. If you check it out, this kind of apron of coolness, it manages to get almost halfway down into Wisconsin. It manages to get, over 100 miles further south in Wisconsin than Minnesota. The part of Minnesota up north that's remaining cool, there's definitely not some nice places. Many people are excited about Duluth as a climate destination. The reason I'm not highlighting those places is because I'm a little concerned about the projected wildfire risks in that northern third. I think we could be talking about Freeport air quality. And also, when we're talking about people moving from the rest of the continental US, I see very few people talk about what it's like to move so far north. Duluth, people talk about it as a climate destination, but it's way up there. If you're not used to the extremely short winter days and the extremely long summer days that far north, it's very difficult to adjust. Your like internal clock gets weirded out by it. It's hard. That's why I'm profiling an obvious choice for Minnesota, because there's a major urban center that is a pretty safe climate destination. Let's talk about the Twin Cities. The Minneapolis St. Paul metro area is big. We're talking about almost 3.7 million people. This metro area has all your major metro downtown area amenities, great culture, unusually good greenways and outdoor access. Downtown, they have almost 10 miles of these public enclosed second story walkways. It's the Skyway system. So you can get around in the winter without going outside if you don't want to. The Twin Cities, they have a very solid reputation in the Midwest as a great place to be for quality of life, medical care, access to culture. However, they have had historically these just mega cold winters. They're the only major metro in America in a classical zone 4. And that's why they have all that cold weather infrastructure, including the Mall of America, which is a big indoor community space. As we move into mid-century, the Twin Cities are dropping down to a zone 5 winter, which is still pretty cold, but it's in line with other contemporary metro winters. The bigger change is the change to the summer. Let's take a second and go over and look at the map. I want to show you these winter changes that I'm talking about. So you could see there's like this little urban heat island of zone 4 around the Twin Cities now, but they're getting like squarely into a zone 5 winter. And a zone 5 winter, if we look back, like there's a lot, like Rockford is not a major metro area, but it's pretty big. It's zone 5. Des Moines, zone 5. If you look over there, Omaha would be a decent sized cities. So the change to the winter, milder, puts it more in line with other urban infrastructures. The change to the summer is big. The Twin Cities used to have a conventional, cool Midwestern summer. We can see that they're moving up into this yellow zone here, which is 61 to 90 days over 86. We can see that's going to be the dominant summer climate in this Midwestern region. This is much closer to the border, where we're looking at under 2 months of hot summer, whereas Chicago, the other obvious major metro for the region, is very close to the border, where we're talking about 4 instead of 3 months over 86. I want to talk a little bit more about the difference in outlook between those metro areas, because I think Chicago is still going to be a major player. The Great Lakes access for Chicago is a big deal. But if you're looking at Midwestern major metros, the climate outlook for the Twin Cities is just better. It's cooler. And if we want to talk about the urban heat island effect, which I do, we're going to be able to see some changes in that in the lived experience. So here I'm pulling up just a zoomed in satellite map. We can see that the Twin Cities have definitely like paved over areas, right? Like we got the airport right there, a lot of concrete, islands of concrete, a lot of green space. If we go over to Chicago, we can see just at a glance that there's a different style, and that as we get into Chicago proper, there is not the same amount of green space. We're talking about a really big concrete island, really dramatic urban heat island effect. There's a difference there that's not just about size. Chicago is about 9.5 million to Twin Cities 3.7 million. Even considering that size difference, the density footprint in the Twin Cities is very different from Chicago. So we're talking about a different summer experience. And that's important when we talk about the fatal threat for the Midwest, which is wet bulb heat waves. Chicago has had mass casualty heat waves in most of our lifetimes. In 1995, over 700 people died of heat in Chicago when it got over 100 for 5 days, topping out at 106. The heat island effect bumped up that temp by 2 or 3 degrees and contributed to the deaths. Those types of heat waves are projected for Chicago to occur much more regularly by 2050. In the Twin Cities, we have no comparable mass fatality heat waves since air conditioning has been widely introduced. They did have a bad heat death in 1936 when they had a freak killer heat wave that included 5 straight days over 105. They have not had a heat wave like that since. There's no record of one ever happening before. And that extreme heat wave is not the type of heat wave projected to become normal at this area at mid-century either. It is projected to have less dramatic heat than that. The Twin Cities, they built up an intense climate control infrastructure related to their winters. It could easily be repurposed for these new summers, these 3-month over 86 summers. Their winters that used to freak out even other Midwesterners, they're going to become a little bit milder. The metro area, it's diverse and it's culturally rich. The murder of George Floyd in 2020 has brought the larger part of that community to engage in deeper reflection and commit to change. There's a lot of social justice work happening in the Twin Cities. There are many people, the majority of the people, who want to build a more just and equitable future in the Twin Cities. If you're looking for a major metro area with a good climate outlook, the Twin Cities is one of the best places in America to build your future and to build a strong future together. So thanks for joining us, folks. And seriously, consider joining us. I tried to give you a rational look at some cities in terms of potential destination areas. It's a great region. It's the best region of the big 3 in terms of capacity for growth, for taking in more people. Much of the northern Midwest can take in 30% or more people without overshooting our water reserves. We could do it sustainably. There are less people in the northern Midwest per capita affiliated with hate groups here than in the other 2 destination regions. There's a distinctive culture here. I mean, I'm a native, I can speak on it. I can't for the other 2 destination regions. Culturally, we're not cool. Or if we are cool, it's like in the fashion of hobbits, where our cultural energy focuses on snacks, beer, and avoiding too much excitement. So, like, it's a good place, but I get that it's not for everyone. If you think it might be for you, though, you get on over here. Let's help build it up. Let's get ready.